I'm Jenny Carlson, StreamLine Marketing Pro and StreamLine Agents. Been in the business for about 20 years. I'm also an agent. And I actually started out in the business as a assistant for a Keller Williams broker. And then it quickly developed into a transaction coordination company. And now Audrey and I have started StreamLine Marketing Pro, which is a CRM website marketing company for real estate agents. So welcome to the class today. So why would an assistant be critical to growth in today's market? Honestly, in my opinion, assistants are really critical to growth in any market, whether it's slow or moving quickly. An assistant can really help with maintaining your momentum really in any market. But the main reason why you want an assistant is time and money. That's the bottom line. Like, there's lots of reasons to have one, use one, leverage it in your business. But the bottom line is you either want to save yourself save yourself time or make money. So those are the two reasons that you would want an assistant. But you know, as an agent, it's easy to get overloaded. You miss out on leads because you just can't keep up. If you're busy, you've got multiple deals happening, and you're kind of chasing things around. Well, while you're doing that, you're not really focusing on bringing in new business. And so you end up with these, what I call these bell curves of business. And so having an assistant can really help with that. They can enhance client services. This one really is a big one. People don't think about this, but when you have an assistant, it helps you level up your service for your clients. You provide a seamless experience and personalized touch, and then you build client loyalty and referrals. I've watched it over time, and agents who really do well at leveraging their assistants as relates to the service they provide to their clients, it really makes a difference in their repeat and referral business. So that one's a huge one. That's why I have that highlighted. It's a big deal. Obviously, you get to focus on revenue generating activities, and you get to achieve that work and life balance. I mean, Kevin, I suspect, like, you know, all agents, right? Sometimes you're up at midnight taking care of things, I would suspect, right? Yeah. Or getting up early, or, you know, just not, you know, running. Right. And so giving you a little more downtime is another reason to use an assistant. Obviously, increasing your revenue, lowering your stress level, and bringing consistency to your processes. That's huge, because then every single client is getting the same experience as the last one. The book, E-Myth Revisited, that is one of the points in that book. I read that years ago as a small business consultant. And, you know, that was one of the primary things, right, to speak about is consistency of processes. They always know what they're going to expect from you. But better than that, they always know that if they refer somebody to you, that it's going to be consistent experience for whoever they refer. And that's a big deal. Having those processes in place is a big thing.
Hey, Jenny,
So,
yes. We just had someone register a minute ago. Is someone trying to get in the call?
Oh, if you guys don't mind, bear with me just a second. Let me see if I can, whoops. Hold on. Let's see, I did not hear a request.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and move our meeting over to my other screen so that if somebody does come in, I can see that. I hopefully see that. All right.
Sorry to interrupt.
Let's see. All right. I'm going to catch up with where we were here. All right. So getting back to what you love about being a real estate agent. So what's your favorite thing that you love, Satin?
Y'all know I love showing houses. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah. Kevin, what's yours?
What's what?
What's your favorite thing about being a real estate agent? What do you love most about being a real estate agent?
Being at closing day and being able to hand my keys to a new homeowner and just seeing the joy on their face and that, like, ear to ear grin.
Yep.
That's what gets me up in the morning.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so that's what we want agents to be able to get back to when you're using an assistant. And we're going to get to this, but you can make your business look any way you want it to, whatever, and every agent can be different, right? And so how you structure the help that you need, that is really all on what works best for you, and making sure that you structure it so it empowers you to do what you love. That's just a huge piece of that. So when should you consider hiring an assistant? That's a good question. When are you ready? Obviously, funds can be something that factor into that, but it's when you find it difficult to maintain consistent production and business growth. So when you are, experiencing those hills and valleys of production, administrative tasks are taking up too many hours. That can be submitting paperwork to your broker. That's always a beast, I think, for every agent I know. You've hit the plateau, right? And you've hit your max limit of deals that you can do in a year, and you're just overwhelmed and you can't do anymore. Your family time or self-care have taken a back seat to your career, and you need that downtime before you burn out and crash. So things to consider. Now, one of the things, Kevin, we have is we have a workbook that we're gonna share with you guys at the end, and then we'll email that to you, because I believe firmly in these classes can be great, but you need something actionable. Like, I don't want you to finish this class and then, okay, that was great, and then you go on and you haven't really engaged or accomplished something tangible. And so with each of our classes, I always provide a workbook, because I feel like having that guide can help us just kind of go through the process and follow it up and really gain something from the class itself, versus just a couple of hours of good information that gets to the back of our brain and we move on, right? So, so there will be a workbook to share as well. But things to consider are going to be your volume goal. Have you hit that volume plateau? Free time goal. So, do you need more free time in your schedule? Are there any goals you haven't had time for? Do you have time to go take those trips to see family? Do you have time to do the community involvement that you want? Those kind of things. Is your time spent on details instead of selling? That's a good question to ask. And then, are details being missed? That's a big one in the process. When you have a client that comes back to you and says, well, why didn't you tell me? Or why didn't you send this to me? Or why didn't you this or that? That's the moment when you're not ahead of your client's ahead of you. And so that's one of the things that I consider in this detail. The business ebb and flow, obviously. And then, how much is your time worth? So I don't know if any of you have ever sat down and figured that out. But if you take your total money earned divided by your total time spent, right? So that is how much your time is worth, right? And sometimes that number is shocking when you think about the time you've spent versus the money that you've brought in, either direction, positive or negative, and you realize how much time you've spent that didn't make you money that should have. Right? So it's a good little practice to go through to figure that out. Okay, so when I started in this business, virtual assistants were pretty much unheard of. Most assistants were unlicensed. And it really was the big agents or big teams that were able to have assistants to begin with. And so now the market has just really exploded. And what kind of assistant you hire and what that looks like is really just open to the imagination. But generally speaking, you have licensed, unlicensed, marketing, prospecting, right? We also have the issue of in-office, we have virtual, we have contract virtual. We're going to go over these, and you have a personal assistant. So the possibilities are endless. There's definitely a difference between the licensed and the unlicensed. In Texas, it's a pretty big deal. If you have an unlicensed assistant do a licensed task, it's a criminal offense in Texas. So, and they actually hold both the assistant and the agent accountable for that. So that's just something to know. Not all states are the same. Their rules are not all the same, but in Texas, it is definitely a big deal. So licensed is going to be things like marketing, wording, showing properties, explaining contracts. And that could even be a buyer calls up and says, well, what happens if I don't get the option in on time? If I'm unlicensed, I cannot answer that question in any way, shape, or form. I have to refer them back to the agent. If I'm licensed, I can actually answer that question. Right. So that's really the main difference, is that if a client calls and they have a question about something, or they have a question about a listing, for instance, I can only say, as an unlicensed assistant on a listing, I can only read word for word what's in existing marketing that the agent has created, or that we as a team, obviously, assistant and agent have created, but I can only read it off of whatever is already published. I cannot ad lib in any way. So that's kind of the big differences. Marketing assistants. This is a big thing right now. Agents really, with all of the social media and the changes that are happening, Audrey is our social media guru. And with all of that happening, many times what agents really need is somebody that can focus on their marketing aspect of their business. So then we have prospecting. So in Texas, they must be licensed, where they literally just follow up on leads and qualify them, set them up on searches, do CMAs. They're literally just your salesperson, so to speak. They're your prospecting assistant. And again, to be able to do that, they do have to be licensed. A unlicensed assistant can make appointments for, say, the inspector, or an existing client that calls up and says, oh, I want to meet with Kevin, and they can go ahead and make that appointment for you. But when it comes to actually following up on leads, that's something that requires the license. So then you have the issue of, do you want them in your office? Do you want them virtual? And do you want a contract virtual, which would be like somebody in Malaysia, as an example, so you pay less. That's the main thing about that. Or do you need a personal assistant? Do you need somebody to run out and do your errands and get your dry cleaning, or, you know, clean, or whatever the case may be? There's different levels of help that you might need. And I always say, so again, I love the book E-Myth Revisited. And one of the things that he talks about is basically hiring to your weakest point. So what area of your life or your business is the area that you need the most help? So what's your weakest point? And that's where you want to hire an expert in whatever that is to do for you, because that's going to make your business stronger. So you kind of think of yourself in a way as, what's your weakest link within what you do, right? But the big question is, in office or virtual? And how I explain it to agents is, some agents do better if they have somebody in front of them that is handing them paperwork, that's saying to them face to face, I need X, Y, and Z from you. So some people will do better with that and then some people do great with virtual. They're able to do the emails and texts and all of that. And it's a personality thing. It's not better or worse. It's just what works better. And sometimes people work better with having somebody in their office with them. And some would rather have them out of sight, out of mind, and just focus on communication through, phone, email, text. So that's the main thing there. So the legal and ethical boundaries for unlicensed assistants, I kind of touched on it. They can set appointments with clients that are already established. They can distribute flyers and brochures. They cannot create the wording. So they cannot create the actual MLS description, for instance. Now here's a line you could potentially walk on that. You could have them do a chat GPT description by putting in the information about the house and doing a prompt, and then they can send that to you and you can approve or tweak it or whatever, and then send it back to them and say, use this. So there's a line there, right? You just have to be careful not to cross it. They can create the flyers and the brochures. They can make appointments for showings and inspections. They can provide information that's already advertised. They can input data to computer. Databasing is one of the most hated activities, I think, for not just agents, but across all industries. And it's the hardest thing to keep accurate as well across all industries. CRMs and keeping them accurate is really the Achilles heel of every business I know. They can place your for sale signs with Compass. You don't, as an example, you don't have to worry about that because Compass has a service within their brokerage to place signs for agents. So just FYI on that. Agents are responsible for assistance actions. So if they violate any rules or law, and it is, as we talked about, a criminal offense. So I've run across some really crazy situations over the years. And had to diplomatically bring that to the attention of brokers, because there have been some instances where the unlicensed assistants got way out of hand. So, okay, so unlicensed assistants can type contracts, but only as specifically directed by you, the licensee. So you would have to, every single blank, you would have to provide what goes in every single blank. They can order supplies, schedule maintenance, bookkeeping, and office management functions they can do. And they may provide information that's already advertised. We kind of covered that already. Unlicensed assistants and what they're not permitted to do, right? So they can't determine if a person is interested in buying or selling. They can't qualify them. They can't negotiate contract. They can't show homes, so they can't give access. It used to be back in the day that even an unlicensed assistant could hold an open house. They could open a house for an agent, go open it. They can't do that anymore. They aren't allowed to give access to properties at all. And the line back then was, as long as they didn't say anything about the property, they couldn't show it, they could open it, they just couldn't talk about it. So that has changed over the years, and that's now a taboo. They can't point out features of a home or a neighborhood to prospective buyers. They can't create marketing wording. They can't qualify the leads. They can't host open houses. That was something that changed back in 2016, by the way. It used to be they could hold open houses, and now they cannot. Steps to successfully hiring. One of the things, I'm going to sidetrack for a second, in that one of the things that I've noticed that comes up is that agents will hire an assistant, whether they try virtual or in-house or whatever, program they decide to go with. And one of the biggest things that they run into is that somehow they don't find that it's saving them anything. It's not really saving them time. They feel like they're having to double check the person. They're not able to get them trained. That I find I come across more often for agents who want an in-house assistant that's not already experienced in the industry. So, but that is an issue. Definitely, where once you hire the assistant, agents are feeling like, well, this was useless. I'm still working as hard as I am and I'm not making more money. So that's definitely something in this process to address, right? And addressing your needs, you need to identify your weakest point in the business. So I touched on that a little bit ago. Finding out if it's bookkeeping, then maybe it's bookkeeping that you hire. What would launch you forward and help you grow? Like what's stopping you right now from getting to the next level of production, and really evaluating that. It could be a fact you need to get out and do more networking, or it could be that you're spending so much time trying to service your existing clients, right? So what is it that's actually stopping you right now? Identifying tasks that drain your time and energy. Things that drain you are the things you need to consider getting rid of first. Calculate the value of your time. We touched on that. that helps you determine what an assistant can do for you and save for you. Commit to effective reallotment of your time. This is a super important step, really important step. If you don't bracket the time that you've saved and allot it to other activities, then that's where some of that time gets lost and you're really spinning your wheels. You haven't gained anything. So if you spend your time double checking and backtracking the work you've assigned, then you're adding to your workload and you're not lessening it. And how that would come into play, there's a difference between training an assistant on how you want things done and then feeling like you have to go back because you're not sure whether they did it or not. You're not sure if they did it right. You're having to double check. So part of that comes into play in processes. So if you have the right processes in place, you don't have to double check their work. And then be sure and look into a confidentiality agreement or a non-compete when you hire an assistant, so that you don't have any issues there. It's not quite the issue it was probably when I started in the business 20 years ago, but it's definitely something that you want to address. Preparing for an assistant job description all the way. I don't care if it's if you're doing in-house, you're doing virtual, whatever it is, you're doing a personal assistant, create that job description. And a lot of that is for both of you. It says for your new assistant, right? It's really for both of you, right? And it's a really important step. Be prepared to train them. So if you're hiring a company like StreamLine agents, like what I do, I've been a transaction coordinator for over 20 years now. And so I have a whole process in place and I do some customization for agents, but my processes are so developed and so finite, right? That really an agent is just really letting me loose on the deal to do what I do well because I'm a professional. But if you don't have somebody that's super experienced, you want to make sure that you have prepared and bracketed the time as well as you're able knowledge-wise to train them in what you really want them to do, right? And be methodical about that. So taking that time is important. Allowing your new assistant to do things differently than you. Okay, so this is something I have a problem with. Like when I hire people, I'm very meticulous about how things are done. And so this is something I have to remind myself of as well, is that as long as you get the end result you're looking for, how they get there, you've kind of got to let them do that in a way that works for them because everybody's mind works slightly differently. It's why different computer programs resonate, different software resonates with different people, that they really love it or hate it. It's because all of us have a different way that our brain will process things. And so allowing an assistant to get there in a different way than you would, as long as that end result is what you're looking for, that's the main thing. Scheduling regular meetings with your assistant, they're going to need that regular feedback and guidance and instruction. So even my clients as under StreamLine agents as a TC, I do better if my agents communicate with me. So if we were just our ships passing in the night, they may have needs that I'm not even aware of, or they need tweaks to what I'm doing for them that I'm not even aware of because we're not communicating. So that's a big piece, making sure that you communicate. And setting up the systems for communication, organization, processes, really regardless of whether you have an experienced assistant, virtual assistant, you want to make sure that you guys have a system. Let me give you an example. If I'm working as a virtual assistant, even within my expertise, there are times when I need an agent to step in. And so part of my system is if an agent gets an email from me that says attention in all caps at the beginning of the subject line, because agents are scrolling all day, right? You see your emails come in on your phone. They see that email that says attention, they know they need to open that and take a look at it, right? They can ignore everything else they get from me until they see that attention in all caps. So that's a process that I've created so that agents don't have to look at every single email I send them. They know when they need to look at something. So recognizing that an experienced assistant is a professional in their field. So if you're looking for someone to run errands, then hire somebody that's a personal assistant. So that's another big thing. You want to hire, and it saves you money, right? If you're looking for somebody to make copies, do $12 an hour work, right? You don't want to hire somebody at $20 an hour to do $12 an hour work. So part of that is to save you money, but it's also to respect them in their professional capacity as well. And then invest in a CRM platform and task management software to optimize your workflows. It's a big deal, right? Technology can be overwhelming many times, and especially, agents are born networkers. They're born people. So they love people. That's what they do. They're not necessarily the ones that are going to sit at the desk and use the CRM platform and the task management, but then that's where your assistant comes in. So, but it's an important piece, and it will help an assistant manage that in a timely manner. So you're also not wasting a lot of hours, financial hours, on paying them to do things they could do much quicker in using good tools like StreamLine Marketing Pro Tools. So I'm not gonna go deep into who makes the best assistant. We're going to quickly go through some of these because as part of the package that you'll get, you'll receive this presentation as well as the workbook. So you can go back through this when you're getting ready to hire to kind of review those applications and make sure that it kind of meshes with what is in this section of who makes the best assistant. But one is obviously the capacity to adapt and quickly learn in learning situations. Typically finds it easy to learn the requirements of a new job. That's these two are like top, right? They also need to be able to communicate under time constraints, high level of reading comprehension. That's a big deal in this industry. Too often, I see responses where you can tell somebody skimmed for some keywords and didn't really read the email. So having somebody who stops and actually reads the communication is a big deal. So strong information gathering, assimilating verbal information, abstract reasoning skills, multitasker, needless to say, right? Self-motivated. You don't want to have to oversee them all the time. Willing to accept you as a leader, to follow your lead. You don't want them to think they know more than you, or that they know more than you do. They need to be able to be diplomatic. So when that client calls screaming and yelling because, I don't know, title changed the close time because the lender was late, you need somebody who can handle those calls. That somebody who's going to avoid small talk and not become frustrated by lack of social contact, because you want them to be behind the scenes. You don't want them to be another networker, unless you're having a buyer's agent, of course. But compliant, respectful of procedures, comfortable with your authority, positive attitude. And I'm just going to flip through some of these. Can make decisions, tend towards methodical approach, but with some flexibility, cooperative, mix of self-direction, comfortable with logic. And the note here is, if you are hiring a marketing assistant or a buyer's agent, this flips, right? You need somebody that is more of a networker. You need somebody with creativity. You need somebody who's got a design eye if they're a marketing assistant. So that's just something to consider, when you're talking about a transaction coordinator or an in-office assistant that's doing a wide variety of tasks. If you need somebody who's specifically focused on marketing, or a buyer's agent, their personality is going to twist a bit to meet those skill sets. So that's just something to consider when you're picking your assistant. Previous employment activities. I'm not going to go through all these, but they will be in the presentation so that you have it. But basically, it just runs through kind of like your average activities for an assistant and what they should have done in their previous jobs. So if you are trying to hire an assistant, this is a good example. If as an agent, many times agents who are struggling will say, oh, well, let me be your assistant. And that's wonderful and that's great. But the average personality or the general personality of somebody who's an agent doesn't usually match the same personality as somebody who makes a good assistant. So there can be exceptions. I had an agent that, man, was she about as organized and deliberate and all of those things. She could do the back office stuff just as good as she could being the networker and the communicator and the rainmaker. So, you know, you always have an exception, but generally speaking, agents don't necessarily make the best assistants, but a lot of times what'll happen is that an agent will hire another agent to be an assistant, and that usually ends up being a frustrating experience for both. So the most common reasons for assistant turnover, they see those commissions and they get tempted, right? And it's funny because an assistant is honestly in the best position to recognize really how much overhead as an agent we have, right? We have the marketing, we have the dues, we have the education, we just have all the materials and everything that we have to do, not to mention what our brokers get and then what IRS gets. And so the percentage of what we actually come home with is really small comparatively to that gross commission that an assistant sees. But once they see it, you know, they get tempted by it. And so they might be tempted by that. They might want opportunity for advancement or higher pay. And that's a common issue where assistants feel like they're underpaid. And so that's going to cause turnover. Some assistants are not cut out for that attention to detail, right? And they will leave out of frustration, or the agent will get frustrated and be like, that's it, you're out, I'm done. And what I want to see within our industry is that it's easier for agents to find the good fit so that they're not wasting time and money going through assistant after assistant or getting so frustrated they give up. And then that limits their income and their growth potential because of that. Sometimes they prefer payroll over the 1099 because they want benefits. Now that's a little easier today than when I started in the business. There's a lot more options for making sure that they have benefits, but that is one of the things that will cause turnover for assistants. They really want those benefits that they're lacking as a 1099 employee. By the way, I'm going to back up a little bit. Let's talk about the 1099 employee. So there's some really fine lines around considering them a 1099 versus a W-2 employee. And it's very hard to have a good structure with an assistant as a 1099 employee to meet the IRS rules related to what you can and can't do. You can't dictate their hours, number one, and that usually knocks them right out of that 1099 category. Now, as a general rule, agents still do it. Do they get audited? Do I know of anybody who's gotten caught? No, I don't. But the truth is, at least as we're talking about rules, the minute you dictate hours, they cannot be a 1099 employee. So just be aware of that factor. When you're doing it, you want to make sure you're up on those rules. And there are some great services like ADP that can do payroll for you if you want to have a W-2 employee. Now, the other thing to consider is, like with StreamLine Agents as a transaction coordination company, we're unique in that, in fact, I don't know of any other service like ours that is an S Corp. We are actually an S Corp. And what that means is that as an agent, agents don't have to file a 1099 for us. They don't have to do anything. They just call us a professional service and put it on their taxes as an expense, and they're done. So that's the nice thing as an S corp. And then also as an S corp, brokers can pay us and include us on the CDAs to pay us have us paid at closing by the title companies because of being an S corp. So many, especially many of the larger brokers, will not allow transaction coordinators or virtual assistants to be on the CDAs anymore, and unless, like in my case, I'm an S corp, because they don't want there to be muddied waters as relates to the commission especially if they're unlicensed, right? And of course, if they're licensed, they're not actually that licensed person broker, and it comes really messy. So just something to take into account as you're setting up that process for yourself with an assistant. Lack of communication. Where that comes in, to be honest, is it comes because the agent is so busy, and I totally understand it, but agents get so busy that it's really hard for them to stop to communicate with their assistant. And so what happens is the assistant gets out of the loop and things start to get chaotic, and then the assistant doesn't know what they should be doing. And so it just creates kind of a little bit of chaos, and they can't overcome that. So really important that if you do have an assistant, that you're able to bracket some time to have clear communication with them. Lack of delegation. Sometimes it's difficult to delegate, especially at first. And so that can leave the assistant frustrated, actually both of you frustrated, and then eventually you'll separate from each other. So just something to think about there. Can you delegate or decide? And again, this is where the job description comes in. This is where some of the workbook work comes in, where you decide in advance, this is what your assistant is going to do or not do. So let's talk cost. So they save you time, and it's fantastic. But this time should be counted in the cost. Your assistant becomes an investment in your company and your long-term business plan, right? And so giving time to them is a part of the cost. So the type of assistance and their experience can affect how much time or money you spend. So again, this comes to the bracketing. What I used to recommend back in the day when I was a small business consultant, you want to make sure that whatever you've decided you need, that what you're paying them is the going rate, so to speak, for that work. And you don't want to have somebody doing copy work and then also doing licensed work. You want to somehow split that out. And you can even set up multiple part-time assistants, right? So this going through that process, that part of that cost of an assistant, that's something to consider. So I've worked with teams back in the day in the Woodlands, for instance. They actually had my business. I would handle their listings, and then they had another assistant that handled their marketing and their closing process. And then actually with that team, it switched over time depending on what was going on with their in-house assistant. She was having babies in that time period and all kinds of things. And so what I was doing would actually alternate based on what she was doing. And so they had multiple. I've had agents that have a marketing site. In fact, I have one right now. They have a marketing assistant that does their social media and does some of their listing marketing. And then I literally take care of everything else. So it really can look however you want it to look. So an unlicensed assistant pay range, if you're just going to pay them directly again, it depends, but somewhere around the $40,000 to $45,000 a year. This really is usually not something that works well for an agent because of the business ups and downs and all of that, unless you're a really large team or a really mega agent where you've got that income coming in to pay for an assistant on a regular basis. So a licensed assistant pay range can fall between $55,000 and $70,000 a year, depending on location and skill set and all of those things as well. Virtual assistants can really run between $18 and $35 an hour, depending on their experience. That's if you're paying them on a hourly basis. A lot of times now you'll find virtual assistants will do things on a project basis. And so a transaction coordinator, which falls under usually under the virtual assistant category, that usually is a per transaction fee. So, and that can run between $300 and $500 a transaction. Contract virtual assistant, so overseas, that cost can sometimes be as low as $5 an hour. And I've seen that used effectively a couple times where really the agent was in pretty close communication with them, and they would have the assistant like reply to their emails, but they're kind of telling them what to reply, right? So they're on the phone with them or whatever, and they're saying here, and they're basically dictating to the assistant what to email to so-and-so. But I've also seen that go really bad when an assistant relied too much on a contract virtual assistant from overseas to handle their transactions or issues with their transactions, and step in where they've actually muddied the waters, acted as a licensed agent illegally, all kinds of things. So it can be really beneficial, but you have to be very defined about how you're using them. So virtual by fee, which I just mentioned, which is some charge the flat fee between $300 and $500, and then they have a very set task list of what they handle. And so usually in advance exactly what they're going to do. The hard part is that every transaction is different. So things come up, and being really clear about who handles what is an important piece, and understanding that, and having a virtual transaction coordinator that can actually say, okay, Mr. Agent, I now need you to step into this because of X, Y, or Z, right? It falls outside their purview, and they need to be able to communicate that with you. The other thing on that is that you have different levels of service. So you have virtual assistants or transaction coordinators that literally they just shovel the paper, they submit to the broker, they make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, but they're not really managing the client experience. They're not really doing more than a cursory communication with either the title company or the lender. They're just keeping very surface, very minimal, and mostly pushing paper. And then you have services like StreamLine where we're more of an A to Z, unless it includes negotiation, which we don't do. If there's a dispute that comes up, that's agent territory. But other than that, you have virtual assistants that literally handle everything from A to Z, get you to closing, have deep communication with the lender, not just, hey, lender, are we on track? They'll go, okay, lender, how far are we away from getting our conditional approval? What's outstanding? Are you getting what you need from the buyer? Asking those deeper questions, because those are the things that tell you whether this deal is on track or not, and it tells you whether or not it's time for the agent to get involved in either contact their buyer to get help, move things along or whatever. So it's a difference between asking those deeper questions that help keep that transaction on track, or just doing the paper shuffling. And the needs vary, so I'm not saying one's better or worse than the other. It's just, it depends on what your needs are. So the cost of not having an assistant is probably something good to cover, which is, the hills and valleys of production and trying to handle all that when you have an influx of transactions, and obviously trying to handle those, and then you're not really focused on production. And then of course you have the valley, because now you've got to focus on production again to get to the next top of the hill. So lack of consistency and experience for your clients, that's a big deal, right? Sometimes what I hear from buyers or sellers is, it was all good and honeymoon right at the beginning. The agent paid me a lot of attention, and then all of a sudden I never hear from them anymore. And so, it just puts a bad taste in their mouth. So keeping that consistency of experience and helping them feel like they're your number one priority, your assistant helps you do that, right? They become your team member, and it's you as a team meeting the needs of your client. So stress, right? Stress is crazy in this business. And so that is really the cost of not having an assistant. And of course, not doing the assistant in an effective way can also add stress, which is why, I really recommend going through the process, going through the workbook and doing the work before you get to that point. You can decide what kind of an assistant you want through the workbook, and then you can work through that process of what are they going to do and what are you going to pay them and all those things. Loss of new business because the leads are slipping through. I had an agent that had so many leads coming in that they literally just could not keep up with them. So even though they were using me as a transaction coordinator, they had so much business already, but then they had so many leads coming in, those leads were just disappearing. And let's be honest, as she disseminated that out to different agents, and I've done it myself as well when I've had a lot of leads and I've disseminated them out, one of the biggest problems in our industry, because we've gone through this period that was so hot that agents weren't really having to do anything to sell. I mean, people were coming in and contracts were being written and everything was closing within a month or two. And so there really wasn't any follow-up required. And if you didn't hear from a buyer, you didn't really care because you were already working with another buyer. Like there were so many people buying homes that agents weren't really stressed for business. And what happened as a result is that a buyer could come and work with one agent, even do showings, and end up buying with a completely different agent because agents weren't able to keep up. And so having an assistant kind of helps be that stopgap. And then, of course, if you have that many leads, you want to consider, getting a buyer's agent. So it's all variable as to your particular needs. But if you've got too many leads, you may want a buyer's agent. So lacking time to regularly follow up with your A-list or previous clients, this is huge. So when I started in the business, it was right before the crash of 2008. And before that, I actually already had StreamLine agents, and I already had kind of graduated from just working with one agent to having multiple. And what I discovered is the agents that were using the Buffini system, the A-list system, the ones that were doing that, they were busy. They were not freaking out because the market had crashed. They weren't freaking out because they didn't have business. They were talking to their clients. Their clients were coming to them. They were asking advice. They were getting referrals. They were still busy and working. Did they still feel the crunch? Absolutely. They had to work harder to make their money. Absolutely. But while other agents were leaving the industry in droves, the agents that had kept in touch with their previous clients did not have that problem. They weren't even thinking about it. They were just doing their job. And they survived that period because they had those relationships with their previous clients. So I would say if there's one thing in this industry that can keep an agent not only busy but thriving, it's this. It's keeping in touch with previous clients, your sphere of influence, people that are going to refer you business. It's huge. So important key to success in working with an assistant is managing that additional time that you gain. So you use your time to make it rain. You're the rainmaker. So making sure that if you hire an assistant to do your marketing, you have them working 10 hours a week, let's just say, on your marketing. Where are you spending those 10 hours? What are you doing with it? Did you need more personal time? So you're going to take 5 of those hours for personal, but what are you doing with the other 5? And making sure you're deliberate about bracketing that time is a big deal. So specifically bracketing time to prospect, or research lead programs, work on social media or marketing, whatever it is that you need to do, and being very specific about it is important. You can use it obviously for personal time. Have processes and policies in place for them to follow. That is super huge. When I started with this first agent, first got into the business, I had been in title, I had been in insurance, I had been a small business consultant. So I had been, periphery of real estate for a while. And when I got into it, I literally had, I think, half a day of training by the previous assistant. And I was thrown into it. And then the broker was so busy, she had zero time to train me. Now, the thing that was beautiful at that time point was our title company was in the office. This was when agents spent their time in the office more. Title company was there. The lender was there. There were other agents there. That her co-broker was there. Co-owner of the property was there. Of the agency was there. And so I was able to go to those people and ask for help with the things I didn't know. And of course, it's just my personality. I'm a knowledge seeker, and so it was generally easy for me. But not all people do that. But that saved me when I got into this business, because I created the processes and the policies out of that experience. But I had people that were super experienced there to lean on and turn to. And so they need to have those processes and policies in place, and it'll make you both 10 times happier, I promise. Training, processes, and then empower them to do the job. So if you have to do the job again after them, there's zero value. And I've seen that happen, right? And it can be either they don't understand, or maybe they weren't the right fit, or whatever it is. But if you have to go behind them and do it over again, it's so worthless. It's a waste of your time and money, and then you're frustrated, and it's just not good. So part of processes are the tools that you and your assistant use. So consistency without losing innovation is super powerful, and a CRM is a must. Like, I don't even care if it's an Excel spreadsheet, but obviously I think online CRM tools are better. But a CRM is definitely a must in this mix, and it's going to make your life and their life so much better. We actually recommend at StreamLine Marketing Pro to our clients that each agent take at least 10 minutes a day to go through their CRM, because most agents don't go through it at all. So 10 minutes isn't overwhelming, and basically you're going name by name, and what it does is it triggers thoughts of, oh yeah, their kid was graduating from high school, I should send them a note. Oh, you know what? I talked to them 6 months ago, and they were talking about they might want to sell this year. It just triggers your memory, and then you can easily reach out in that 10 minutes, send them a text, send them an email, touch base on Facebook, do an interaction, and it helps you keep in touch with your database. And that's a powerful tool, because those people come back and say, oh yeah, and you know what? My so-and-so is going to sell, or yeah, I'm ready to do that. And so you'd be surprised how often that timing ends up being perfect, but it does mean getting in there every single day. Division of labor. So clear guidelines, the job description, right, for agent and assistant. It avoids confusion or task being missed. So if you don't have that clearly defined, you can think your assistant's doing something, your assistant thinks you're doing something, and in the meantime, the client's not getting served because it fell through the cracks. So it's an important piece. Communication is like number one. Keeping your assistant in the loop on emails, phone conversations that you had with other parties. If a loan company or title company reaches out to you, they call you, they text you, because you build those relationships, and they say, okay, well, we're going to be 2 days late on the conditional approval, but your assistant doesn't know that, right? You're having to backtrack and either tell your assistant, or you're the one that's up at 11 o'clock doing an amendment to try to beat the deadline. And so if you just say to that party, the loan officer or the title company or whoever, hey, can you go ahead and tell my assistant? Can you let them know that this is an issue, right? Because then your assistant, assuming they're trained and ready, you've got a good sync with them, they're going to be like, okay, I need to do an amendment. And they're going to text you and say, hey, I'm doing an amendment. Are you cool if I send this out? And you're just going to be like, yes. It's going to save you time. It's going to keep things flowing, and you're not going to miss any deadlines. So it's just an important piece. Refer back to your assistant. I just covered that. If they contact you, go ahead and shoot back to them and let them know they need to let your assistant know. If you have to stop and tell your assistant, then again, that wastes your time. And so as part of the initial process, your assistant should be sending out an email to everybody that says include them. So if they apologize, sorry guys. So they should be sending that out, but a lot of times the title companies and lenders, they will just kind of bypass and go to you. So you want to just kick that back. So taking it to the next level, I've mentioned this book a couple times, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber. What you do in your model is not nearly as important as doing what you do the same way each and every time. It avoids confusion. It avoids things falling through the cracks. It creates consistency of experience for your clients. It equals being memorable, and it creates that repeat and referral business, and it provides a consistent value. It's huge. It's game changing in your business. It truly is. So doing a transaction, if we're just talking about transactions here, doing a transaction with excellence, it literally can be 60 to 80 tasks per transaction. It can be 70 to 150 emails. It's managing expectations for the buyer or the seller. It's accountability follow-up with title and lender, and it's informational brochures for the buyer and seller. So it's, if you are doing it well, if you're giving them excellence, that's really what you're seeing. So I know that in many transactions that sometimes it's just these cursory connections until you get to closing, but a really well-managed transaction really does truly take that much to make it go smoothly for your client. So the benefits of a virtual assistant is no paid holidays or vacations. No employee taxes, that's a big deal, right? No additional office space, no additional equipment, no employee related paperwork, staff during peak or busy season. So if you don't need some help at that point, you don't have to worry about it. A virtual assistant, you just use them when you need them. So when you do have those, holidays or downtimes, you're not paying for somebody that doesn't have anything to do. There's no training time and expense with that training when you use an experienced virtual assistant. That is a key. You do want somebody experienced. You don't have the additional software expense usually. So if you're using somebody who's a professional in the field, your virtual assistant, some MLSs do require assistants to pay the dues, but other than that, you're not paying usually for additional software. Many software actually provide a free assistant license. Not all, but a lot of them do. StreamLine Marketing Pro, we actually do. Your assistant is a free add-on. So they have access to your systems for free. Paying a virtual assistant only when you need the assistance. No employee turnover, which is fantastic. You don't pay for the socializing, the lunches, the trips to the washroom, the stopping by the water, the water fountain where they're, gossiping about their weekend or whatever. You're paying, when you're paying a virtual assistant, you're usually paying by job, or you have very specific expectations about what they're completing within a certain amount of time if you're paying them hourly even. So 1 hour work or 100 hours, the virtual assistant is ready and able to make it happen. So StreamLine Agents, again, that's my transaction coordination company, been around for 20 years. And if you need help, feel free to reach out and we'll do a consultation. And I firmly believe that every agent should hire to their best work style and what fits with them most. And sometimes that's not having somebody virtually. Sometimes that is hiring an in-house assistant or doing a contract virtual assistant that's really just following your direction in the moment. Or even you need a buyer's agent. So very much I'll do that consultation and help you through that process. StreamLine Marketing Pro, again, we're the business CRM company. It offers websites, social media platform, newsletter, blog. It's unending email templates, email campaigns that go out. And the difference I feel like within our system is that our content is not that canned sounding, use me that clients don't open. We are specifically answering questions that your clients might have, such as, well, what if I find a home that's a FSBO? So that's a great question. And buyers want to know that. And sometimes they just don't feel comfortable asking you about it. So our emails are just specifically designed to answer questions that, whether it be a buyer who's ready to go out showing or not, or a seller, that it's specifically answering the questions that they might have. Are they farm and ranch? Are they land? So all of our email campaigns are designed to be engaging and not just that canned sounding salesy messages that you get from many of the CRMs. The other thing is we're local support. Both Audrey and I are here to help you. We help you use the system. It's a pretty easy system, but if you get caught, you're trying to build a landing page for a website, you get unending landing pages, by the way. So if you're trying to build a landing page or a website for your listing, get stuck, you can reach out to us and we're local. And so that's one of the benefits of what we do for you. So feel free to check out our website at the StreamLineMarketingPro.com. And I really appreciate you being here today. I appreciate you joining us and doing this class with us and working through this with us. And we will get the workbook out. We'll have a landing page as well you can go to where you'll get this presentation, you'll get the workbook, and you'll be able to work through this. And of course, if you want to have a chat about it and kind of talk about your specific situation, I'm always available to do that.